Hi everyone, welcome back to On Our Terms, hosted by moi, Ismatou Bah, the big sis that fucks up so you don't have to. And obviously, before we get started, let's set some ground rules. This is not a safe space, it's a brave space. In honor of that, Mummy, I swear to God, I'm Muslim. Featuring Fatou Berry. Fatou is a trailblazing strategist, writer, and community advocate. Fatou's work is deeply rooted in imagining better futures for all, with a passion for storytelling and a knack for strategic communication. She has collaborated with industry giants such as Samsung, GoPuff, and WeWork, leaving her mark on the world of communications. Beyond her professional achievements, Fatou's heart beats for her community. As a founder of the nonprofit PR Girl Manifesto and a co-founder of the advocacy group Hold the Press, she has tirelessly worked to uplift Black individuals and create opportunities for those from historically underserved backgrounds. Her unwavering commitment to equity has earned her recognition from PRS ANY, Day One Agency, and Provoke Media. And one thing I haven't noticed is that Fatu is Guinean, and the way we actually met is through Guinean Youth Alliance. I want to say 2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago?
3 years ago.
Because it was COVID, right?
2020.
It's been 4 years.
Yeah, since 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were protesting.
It was when
together.
they're doing nonsense in Guinea. Which they're always doing nonsense in
they're
Guinea.
still doing nonsense.
But
which is sad. But that's how we met. And throughout the years, we've always had conversations over DM.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't we bring this to the podcast? Because we be sending like paragraphs to each other.
We really doing voice notes and just going back
sending,
and forth.
sending.
The voice notes could be a podcast.
No, honestly,
Yeah.
I should actually maybe loop that in. No, actually, no. We're at the podcast.
Listen, NDAs and that.
And so today we're going to be kind of talking about our connection and like our growth in faith. More so just, I think there's something very specific to being Fulani and Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to start off with, how would you say you were raised in Islam? And your background in general, like
by force, by might, no. So I didn't really grow up in a Islamic community. I think I was born into Islam, Muslim, but I didn't have many Muslims around me outside of my family. I think my mom had kind of kept us a little bit isolated from the larger Ghanaian community growing up.
Same.
Yeah, and that's where you meet other.
Did you go to Arabic school?
I did go to Arabic school. So I didn't grow up in the culture, but I used to go to Arabic school during the weekends. And that in itself was an experience because she sent me to an Arabic school in a mosque that was very much anti-Black. And I don't think that she had even recognized it.
It wasn't Fulanis? It wasn't run by Africans?
No, I was with people of Arab descent. And that was interesting because when I went, I was just so miserable. There are times where I used to say I was going to Arabic school and didn't go to Arabic school and went and posted up in a Dunkin' Donuts and sat there for the entirety of the time that it would have taken until she caught on and she was just like, yeah. So I didn't it's one of the things that I wish I had been able to do, grow up in a Fulani or an African Arabic school.
Yeah, because I find that a lot of people that went to Arabic school within their community, I don't know whether it was a Fulani mosque or a West African mosque, they have such a different affinity for Islam. And even though I went to a Fulani mosque,
okay,
but it was just a mess. Nobody was learning, everyone was fighting. There was actually a lot of inappropriate things that happened the mosque.
Okay.
And I was looking back at it, it was crazy. And my mom literally was I actually don't want you guys going there. She was also being very I don't want you guys to mix with kids. There's always that type of energy, which is kind of weird.
No, I feel I definitely have experience, and I think that's why she didn't send me to a Fulani Arabic school. I think there was for whatever reason, I think she saw just because I also think that there is this this thing that we tend to not talk about in our religion, where it's what do we see as the ideal standard of what it means to be Muslim. And I think for her at that time, she was just I'm gonna send her to this Islamic school because whether it's internalized whatever, she thought that was the better choice. But I definitely grew up in a Fulani Islamic household, and so a lot of what I was learning post the Arabic school debacle is what we'll call it, was from people in the community. I've had uncles who
do not hold back.
Yeah,
and letting you know what their thoughts.
And that's where I learned a lot of what was the Islamic way, what it meant to be a good Muslim girl, a good Muslim woman. And so I had that background. Yeah.
Got you. And the thing is, I feel like what a lot of people don't realize too, being West African and Muslim, there's constantly like they conflate the two. And there's always now we have the discussion of like culture and religion
Yeah.
constantly being conflated.
Yeah.
And I guess when did you start picking up or like realizing, oh, this ain't in the
This
Quran.
is not what
like
it's supposed
this
to
is
be. Yeah, I think honestly, certain things just never felt right to me. Like when they were taught to me, I'm like, this doesn't feel like the most peaceful religion, right? That I'm being told is. And so I think for me, it was honestly, it was in that realm of like the time where, to give context, I basically was like, since I'm not trying to go to Arabic school, like I'm not trying to actually go to the class, I need to teach myself. Like that was my whole plan. I was gonna teach myself how to read Quran. No one was ever gonna find
you're better
out.
than me.
Girl,
Because I was like, this is over.
Listen, I attempted. I literally would be in Dunkin' Donuts, like literally doing research, because I was just so committed to like not being found out. But I think as I was doing that in that time frame, and then also realizing that what I was being taught at home is what was supposed to be Islam and what was supposed to like be like how we're supposed to act as Muslims, like the two things did not like mesh. Like for example, like I grew up in a household where people were constantly backbiting. Backbiting is a sin. Like talking about other people is a sin. And so those things were so like contradictory to me. And then I started to realize that like culture and religion are completely different. And then I think I started to see how much culture was ingrained like into how is being taught religion and how to be Muslim.
Do you think your parents like, well, actually, no, I don't think our parents like really ever realized the two are conflated. Because that's just not a thought that really passes through their mind.
Yeah.
Do you feel like at any point they like try to kind of use it to, I don't know, just like impose their rules on you?
Heck yes. I think most of my experience growing up, I think with religion and having religious trauma is the reality that like religion was weaponized, right? And so it was used as a tactic and as a tool to instill fear in me. And I think we should fear Allah, but not in the ways that our parents or my parents specifically made me like think I should fear Allah. And so for me, I think like understanding that now as an adult, like I can see more clearly like, wow, like you really did use this, whether, you know, and I'll say this, whether or not it was intentional or not, because I do think that our parents do what they were taught, right? And so like if my mom didn't know any better, if that's how she was raised and she doesn't have like, you know, any other outside knowledge, then like sure. But I mean, yeah. And so like seeing how that was used, like absolutely, I think religion was weaponized in my household.
Yeah, I think for me it was like seeing everything that was taught in theory and then not seeing my parents like my actual parents practice it. I was like, oh, y'all are like y'all are fake. Like,
yeah, you know, I definitely like have had some moments where I'm like,
I'm like, this is not adding up.
But you're
like,
telling me to do this thing that you don't even do, like literally
yourself. And it's like for me at least, like I remember so. You know, my mom doesn't wear the hijab, and that was like a decision that she made, which is fine, like period. But for me, every time there was like I did something wrong or I got punished or I don't know, whatever it was that I like messed up, she would be like, you have to wear the hijab.
Oh no.
And I would be like, and obviously like also we're growing up in a very Islamophobic society as well. And so when you know, I would go to school, obviously even though I went to like an all, like at the time it was like all black public school, kids would still make fun of you and like pick on you. And so for me that and seeing, I was like, you don't even wear the hijab, but like every time I do something wrong, like I have to put the scarf on.
Oh, that makes me so sad, because I feel like hijab is such, like if you talk to any, I think, person who wears hijab, who has grown up for the most part with hijab, like hijab is not meant to be like this thing that's like supposed to punish you, right? It's like my sister is the hijabi, and like how much pride she has, you know, in being a hijabi. I think that's like what we're all supposed to fear. So like, and it's things like that they do, right? That I've realized that they start to associate like all of these like ways to kind of like punish you or control you with things in Islam that we should actually be like super happy about and like lean into. So
yeah, no, and same another experience too, I would say, is like learning the Quran. It was always such a traumatic experience with either of our parents, because they don't really have the patience to teach, which is fine. They're not teachers. Perfect.
Okay. But recognize that.
Yeah, we'll recognize that. But it was always like whenever we were on timeout or in punishment, that was the time to read the Quran. It was never like a joyous activity. And I always wonder, like, do other people experience the same thing? Because I feel like that's why now even like it was so funny because now I have so many Muslim friends,
Yeah.
and growing up, every time I would hear the Quran, I would kind of cringe. Like I'd kind of be
Okay.
like,
Okay. Yeah.
and they were just like, no, it's so beautiful, and like they
Yeah.
would speak about it in such a spiritual way, and I'd be
Mm.
like,
Yeah, but you have trauma.
I'd be like twitching. I'd be
That's
kind of
religious
twitching when
trauma.
they tell me about
Right. You
listening to
hear
the
that
Quran.
Don, you hear that
Or like
Don call.
as I got older, my mom kind of realized, oh, like these kids actually might not be, they might not be Muslim. Like I
Yeah.
need to start, and she would try to like play the
Mm-hmm.
Quran, and we would all just be like, what
Yeah.
are you doing? Like why are you doing
No, why?
this? Yeah, no. And then another thing I guess I want to go into touching is like growing up in Islamophobic spaces, because
Mm-hmm.
like you're a bit older than me, so
Yeah.
like you probably, I don't remember 9/11,
Yeah.
but I like know that life after was significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like what is your experience like being raised in Muslim, like being raised Muslim like post 9/11?
Yeah. So I think I will say this. I think I was less expressive of my identity in Islam. So I will say that I was raised in a predominantly white community, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that already affected like my expression of like, you know, I didn't grow up around other Muslim kids. So there wasn't really that like, hey, I'm Muslim, are you Muslim too? 9/11 definitely made me afraid, right? To even like, and mind you, I'm not visibly Muslim, right? There are people in this world who are visibly Muslim, who wear hijab, who all these things. I'm not visibly Muslim, and I wasn't visibly Muslim back then. But the way that people viewed Islam and viewed Muslims, I think many of us forget like how intense of a time post 9/11 was for a lot of like Muslim communities. The heightened Islamophobia, right? The hate attacks on like even some people who they perceived to be, you know, Muslim, like people who were like, you know, wore anybody who wore headgear, whether or not you practice Islam or not, like were attacked. And so I think 9/11 definitely affected, I think, like my openness to in certain spaces to be like, hey, I'm Muslim, just because, you know, they have such xenophobic like rhetoric that they already make assumptions about like who you are, like what you believe in. And I think for me the biggest thing was like that's when at that time is when the narrative of like Muslim women are oppressed, Muslim women don't have any say, like that was really prevalent. And I remembered I didn't want to be like, you know, God forgive me, I didn't want to be associated with that at the time. And so I was just like, I don't want anyone to think that like I'm being oppressed by like my religion, by my family. And so I think I definitely started to create distance. I think post 11 I started to create distance between me and my Islamic identity. And you know, I've talked about this with you too. It's like there was a period of time where I would not call myself like a practicing Muslim, right? Where I was Muslim in name, but not Muslim in act or in worship. And you know, that was accelerated, and I think the seed for that was post 9/11 for me.
Yeah, I also think a lot of parents too raised their, I think my parents subconsciously, also because they were so aware of like how heightened Islamophobia was, they subconsciously kind of distance us from religion as well. And like I think also contributed to my mom not wearing the hijab as much, as well as like us not presenting as a Muslim family, not saying that. And I wonder how many and I don't think they had like the vocabulary or the range to maybe like put words as to why they were doing, but I do think like looking back at it now, that has to be the main reason why it just wasn't, because my parents were like really gung-ho about education and everything, but it was like religion was the one thing where they just really dropped the ball. Like
I also think too, one thing I think I can look back on now and see as a reflection is that like it's very hard to raise Muslim children in the United States of America. Like I think if we ever talk about like Deen versus Dunya, or like falling like, you know, way like having your Deen fall wayside like because of wanting to experience whatever in this Dunya, I think it's here. I think America exposes you to so many things. One, I think America makes it hard for you to raise your children in, you know, to sustain Islamic values, because you could teach them whatever you want at home, but they go out into the world and like literally you're inundated with everything that like is against,
like it's anti-Islam.
So I think also like I will, you know, I'm gonna give an olive, like what is it they call it, an olive branch or like a leaf or something to our parents, is that maybe, you know, it's hard, that was hard, right, to like to be a child and like to hear that everything you might be interested in is also haram, you know. I think our parents, maybe the Islamophobia, and then maybe also wanting to like save us a little bit from like just feeling as though we were
left out.
But like I mean, yeah, I can say the same. I think and we talked about this a little bit, I think line is at a certain point. I think growing up, my mom also like gave up on like just me and Islam.
Yeah.
Because there was such like tension and resistance to it. But it's because I was traumatized by the upbringing in Islam, and so I got to a point where I could like knew that I had certain choices. Or I could think, there was a little bit of like room to push back on things that I didn't want to do, and that was one of the first things that that kind of like went to the wayside of like, nah, like distancing myself.
I feel like for me, for my parents, it was like a jump scare. It was like, are you guys Muslim? Because like we went to boarding school. We're a boarding school family, so it's like, I think a lot of what my parents didn't realize, like when you send your kids away, you kind of relinquish like imposing a lot of your beliefs on them, which I don't think they realized. Like I think they were like, oh, you're gonna get a great education, scholarship, like boarding school. That's so fancy. That's so great. Yeah. But then when we came back and we had like our own identities and our own beliefs
that you had formed outside of them.
They were like, I think my mom was like, I think it was like traumatizing for her, and it was like she started grieving because she was like, oh, like I've lost. I think she felt like she lost her kids, especially because there was none of that religious connection. Because all of us would come back from school and she'd be like praying, and then she'd be like, join me, and we'd all just be like, no,
not no.
Or we'd just be like, and she would like. It got to a point where she would like force us, and it was really really combative in the house, and she would be like, you need to pray. And so we would go and do fake wudu and be like, we'll show you, we're not gonna pray, and
I'm screaming
like no, and it was so it was so, looking back at it, it was so silly, like, but
I think it's important like to talk about that, because it's like the way we're raised in the religion makes us so like we have so much resistance and so much tension.
And it was also like, it was anger. Like, I was very angry. I was like, why are you forcing me to pray? Like, you cannot force me to believe in anything that I don't believe in. Like,
and now you're probably like, you love to pray. You're like, man, like,
but I didn't get there until I moved out, which is the gag.
That's the gag. And that's the gag.
That is the gag. Like, I literally, when I moved out of my family home, I was like, I felt a need to be closer to Allah. And I was like, I need, like, this world is actually a bit too crazy for me. I need something to, like, anchor me.
No, I agree. I think there was a little bit of a time in my life where there was distance between me and my family, and that was intentional. That was, like, as a result of a lot of, like, just things coming up for me, personal work that I had to do that I felt like I couldn't do in relation to my family at the time. And when that happened, it like jump started this journey of just spiritual like seeking spiritual fulfillment, right? And really wanting to like know the religion for myself. And I you sharing that is like, yeah, no, I had to like get out of that environment to be able to even like open up the subject of like, okay, I want to re-explore my identity in Islam. I want to like know Allah on a deeper level, but also like I want to have a personal relationship with him that doesn't feel influenced by how I grew up.
Exactly. And like for me, it was like I have so much anger towards this religion, and I can't figure out why and where it's coming from. And so, and one thing I always say now, even especially when, because you know how Fulani men love to give you advice, love to tell you like what you should do or what you shouldn't do or how you should do it and like whatever. And I always tell them, I'm like, listen, like your Islam is not my Islam, so like
but
keep
also,
it all the way over there.
But also I feel like any practicing, so yes, in our religion we're supposed to advise, right? And it's supposed to be from a place of love, and it's supposed to be from a place of care, and to like make sure that everybody's like following the path that they're supposed to be following. And I think that if it was that, I think there would not be resistance to it. But a lot of the times when we're being told to do things, specifically like in my experience, like in, you know, the Fulani background, it's coming from a place of like, I know better than you. You have to listen to me. And that's not the way, you know, like I've met other Muslims that are not Muslims, that, you know, Fulani Muslims. And I'm like, okay, so there is a different way. There is another way of like engaging with each other, of like cultivating like religious, interest, like spirituality that doesn't feel like someone is always trying to force your hand to do something.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it wasn't until I like travel actually really opened my mind up to Islam, because that's when I really realized the Islam that I was practicing was Fulani Islam. And I really want us to get into Fulani Islam and how oppressive it is, how weaponized it is, and how a lot of men in the community use it to control their wives and daughters. And one time, I think it was when I went to Senegal.
Okay.
When I went to Senegal, I just like I saw this family, and the way that they practice Islam was like just so different. The way that the father treated the mother, because for the longest I associated Islam with, I think, the reason why my parents' marriage didn't work, to be honest. Because I was like, like this religion. That's why my dad acts the way he does. That was just like what my little brain was putting together. And then as I got older, and I was like, maybe it's unique. What he was doing was not the Islam that we should have been doing. And it really opened my eyes up into like what was really wrong. Which was, as I call it, Fulani Islam.
She's like, I've coined it.
I coined it. Okay. It is Fulani Islam. Fulani Islam is the problem, and I'm here to talk about it today.
I'm screaming.
And so I kind of want to know, like, when was your like realization of that and like reckoning with that, I guess? And like you said, there was a time you were like distant.
I think for me, and this is also recent, I talk very openly about my my identity in Islam and reclaiming my identity in Islam. And that's because for so long, the Islam that I was brought up in was like, Islam is perfect. Allah is perfect. Muslims are not. Fulani Muslims are not perfect. And it is because that gap we're talking about, like, culture is ingrained into religion. And I think for me, when I picked up a Quran, when I started like reading the Quran again for myself, when I started finding different sources of like knowledge, right, listening to lectures and just asking myself questions too about like, what does the Quran actually say about X, Y, and Z? I started to realize that like so much of like what I had been told like was not the thing. It's not what Islam is meant to be. It's
literally not in the book. It does not exist. Like it's not a thing.
Really like something that, you know, I want to use this to like influence like a decision. Let me lean into this, and it's not that. And I think for me too, like you talk about, you know, like maybe this is why like my dad acted this way. I think the biggest thing for me was like one of the moments was seeing how men treated women, right, in real life, like that, and said that it was because of like religion versus what the Quran actually says. And the Quran holds women in such high regard. And I remember that just blowing my mind, right? Of like even the way that like we are supposed to engage with each other, how men and women are supposed to engage each other, what love is supposed to look like between a man and a woman. Like all of those things completely were in contradiction, I think, to what I had seen growing up, what I had seen in the community. And it just was just like, wow, like if this is not what it is, then what else did I grow up to believe that is not, you know, really reflective of what it means to be Muslim and what it means to really be like somebody who's, you know, pursuing an Islamic like spiritual path. And so I think for me that was the moment. Is like I had to like really open up a Quran for myself, and I had to read for myself. I had to learn. And it's so interesting because it's like I almost envy reverts, right? Because reverts, like, they get to experience the learning of Islam through a lens that isn't like muddled by just like cultural influence, right? So they get to really learn, and I think really have a deep appreciation for the religion that they're choosing to learn, where I think sometimes when you're born into it, you don't get that because your culture is so ingrained into how you just experience Islam, right? And then that comes with all of these different things that like, you know, make you feel like you don't really have a place in the religion. I think one of the biggest things too that kept me away from Islam for so long was feeling imperfect, because I was told that I was imperfect in Islam for so like long. My entire childhood was like, this is not what a Muslim like does or how a Muslim behaves. Like I kept being told, you're not a good Muslim, you're not a good Muslim. And I like, you know, whether or not I internalize that, and I'm like, oh, I'm not a good Muslim, so I just, maybe I'm not. Like, you know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm not.
And I remember even telling myself, I was like, maybe it's not for me then. Listen. And also, like, I hate not being good at anything. So the fact that you're telling me that I'm not good at it, I'm not going to do it now. And I literally just told him, I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. So that's it. And my mom was like, what do you mean you're not doing it?
I'm
just not doing it.
No, like, it's real. And so you start to believe that. And then I think it's like, you don't realize that, like, the entire like how we engage in this religion is based on forgiveness. There's a reason why we ask God to forgive us, because he's always wanting to forgive us. There's a reason why we ask God to to allow for other people to forgive us. This religion is one where like to be forgiving is a thing. Intention is a thing. And I think that's also what like kind of messed with my like understanding of Islam too, is that part was left out of all of my Islamic teachings, that like if the intention,
that was a really small part. They would say all these things and it'd be like, Allah will forgive you.
Yeah.
And like you should be
I'm
forgiving.
like, but intention is the intention is the religion is anchored in what were your intentions. So if I didn't mean to do bad and I did bad, does it erase the bad? No. But my God is a forgiving God. That part wasn't ever taught to me. And so like I talk about like, yes, we should fear Allah, but not in the way that I think the culture makes us think that we should fear Allah.
Yeah.
Like we're taught to see Allah as an unforgiving, unlike not understanding, but like how could he not when he is like the knower of all things, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was when I really learned, like opened up a Quran and like started to learn things for myself that came to.
But I'm not even surprised that you say that, because you did say that, like I think earlier we were talking, you were like, Fulanis do, at least the Fulani elders do feel like they are an authority on Islam.
Yeah.
And I do think that is tied to, I think, just the historical.
Yeah, because think about who the Fulanis were, right? And so like when you talk about the expansion of Islam in like specifically Guinea, right? And you talk about like Futa, Dalaba, all these places, like Fulanis are historically an Islamic tribe. And so we are known to like be we were very much like integral in the expansion of Islam and like Islamic thought, Islamic theory, and like making sure that like all of like just Islamic lifestyles like that, we're at the anchor of that in Guinea. And so I think that also adds like to your point, like this authoritative, like, well, we could never possibly be wrong, because like look at the history of this, and this is coming from like a Fulani Muslim, like and I'm like, no, sometimes it's us,
so,
we're
like,
the problem sometimes.
Yeah.
And so
and it's interesting because I always, when I look at my Maninka friends, they're religious, but it always seems like ours is to another level of extreme. And I call Fulanis, I always say like Fulanis are like the Orthodox Jews of West Africa.
You definitely did say that.
We are the Orthodox Jews of West Africa. I will stand on that, period.
Standing on business.
And that is because I do think we are very conservative in our thought.
And we're told to only marry each other. And I think there's like this outdated, like, whether or not people want to say the quiet thing out loud, there is this outdated ideology that like we need to stay with each other, we need to be with each other. Like think about it, like I remember like even when I like used to broach the topic of like marriage, you know, when it was something that, you know, I thought, you know, when it was something that like I was like, okay, I definitely want to get married. The first thing I remember being told was, okay, he better be a Fulani Muslim. And in my head I was just like, have you seen the Fulani Muslim men out here?
Like, that's never gonna happen. I remember the first thing I told my mom, this is back when I was still reckoning, but I was like, I'm gonna marry a white man. And my mom was like,
listen, I have been there too.
I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna marry a white man. And it's gonna be great.
Your face though, is it just shows to me, you were like, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
what
I'm
about
gonna
it?
do it. Yeah, and then my mom was like, okay. Like,
not okay.
Yeah, because at that time I was like 13. So she was just like, she's not serious.
Yeah,
like, she's not serious. And then around like 18, I was like, you know, I brought home like a Puerto Rican boyfriend, and my mom was like, she was gagged. She was like,
she's not gagged.
She was like,
oh,
like
what?
you're actually committing to this.
Yeah.
Like, and then she was like, you have to get rid of him. I was like, no.
Not you have to get rid of it. Yeah, I'd say yeah. I think I definitely grew up in. I think my mom was like very much like whatever for like, because she didn't take it seriously. So I think when she always believed that when I got married, it would be to a Fulani and it would be to a Muslim man. And I think for me, I've had like, it's just, I think the type of woman I am, I find it very hard to believe that like it would mesh with the Fulani Muslim men. And that's my nice way of saying it. I know tons of amazing Fulani men that are friends, but like I don't see it for me.
I just didn't see, in terms of like the ones that I would speak to, I was like, my way of thinking, your way of thinking is just not gonna work.
I
like
agree.
We can't
go
move together in life, because the way that you see a wife to be a counterpart to you, like it's not the same thing for me. And so it's definitely impact. And also like just seeing my dad, I think I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't really interact with Fulani men. They were like very few,
Yeah.
and they were my cousins, and I
I
was
was
like, you guys are dumb. Like,
I
I
was gonna
cannot.
say it was my uncles, my like the males in my family for sure, and I think that I just, you know, I just saw ways of being that did not align with the way that I believe that life and and marriage should be.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
for me, I feel like those men symbolize a lot of like what Fulani and Islam
Mhm.
is. So I was like, so this is what Fulani and Islam is,
Mhm.
and I want to be whatever you are. I want,
You want to be on the other
yeah, I
side,
want to be on the other
away
side
from
of
the other
that.
side
Yeah,
of that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I feel like it really pushed me to like go to the extreme,
Yeah.
and definitely impacted the way that I dated or saw dating
Yes. Yes.
significantly.
Mhm.
And so I also want to kind of talk about like just having like progressive liberal views,
Yeah.
and then being Muslim.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, my best friend in the whole wide world is like a gay man.
Okay. Yeah.
And so
Same.
I have
Same.
yeah, so it's like I always reckon with
Mhm.
like, and also like my mom knows my best friend,
Okay.
and when he came out, like my mom was like confused because
Mhm.
like she was just like, this is like a Harvard educated man, like
Yeah.
she was like how could he be gay, because
Yeah.
like to her like he is
Mhm.
perfect. And like over a while, like after a while, because she's known him since he was like a kid, like a
Yeah.
baby.
Mhm.
Shout out to Cahleb. And
Shout out
so
to
um and I think her knowing
Mhm.
him so well, I
Yeah.
think it really forced her to kind of be like more accepting.
Yeah.
And like, because she was like, how is this boy that like I
Mhm.
love and like I hold to such a high regard, like, you know what I mean? It conflicted with her religion for
Yeah.
I think for so long, and she was like, I think she had to reckon with it for the longest, and now she just kind of doesn't even acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And she's like, he's gay, but
Yeah. It's just a
he's
part.
Cahleb.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Mhm.
just Cahleb. But it's like, for me, like, my best friend is gay,
Yeah.
and I'm not home. Like, I'm not gonna ignore him being
Yeah.
gay, and like, I may have gay children,
Mhm.
and
You
like
may
I am, and
listen.
I'm Muslim, and
Yeah.
so it's always something that I struggle with, because
Mhm.
like I feel like if I do have a gay child, like,
Mhm.
would I be able to bring this kid around my community? Would I
Yeah.
be able to bring him around
Yeah.
my family,
Yeah.
bring him to Guinea,
Mhm.
have them connect to my culture?
Yeah.
Because culture is so conflated with
It's
religion,
conflated religion. Yeah. Mhm.
and so that does worry me as
Yeah.
I get older,
I
because
think it's a genuine concern too, because it's like, as someone who also like, I have friends from all walks of life, friends of all different identities, sexual preference, all of it. And I think the one thing for me growing up was like, I never like I never like could get behind like not loving someone or having someone in my life because of something, of a part of their identity, right, that was in contradiction to what I was told to believe in. And I believe in Islam, and I love my religion, but I also believe that like everything, not everything is for me to make, my like not even decision, but it's not for me. It's like I know what I know to be true. I know what I know to be true about the people in my life that I
yeah,
love. And it's like I also believe that everyone like in my life that I love deserves safety and deserves to be able to be who they are and their full self, like what you're
yeah,
saying. But and I think for me that might be one of the points of tension between me and like my family, is that I'm very like unapologetic about that. I'm very like, hey, this is what I believe in. I'm lucky enough that I think my immediate family has also kind of like, you know, um, has also like adapted that, and it's always been a thing. But there are definitely people in my extended family that feel differently.
yeah,
And there are definitely things that I get into like those are topics that I get into arguments with, about. But I agree, like it's hard to think about like would my child have a safe space? And not because necessarily because of the religion, but because of the culture and like the rhetoric that surrounds like what it means what's acceptable or what's not acceptable.
yeah. I mean, for me, like, I think a few years ago when I started really reckoning with religion,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of made the decision that like my religion has to make sense to me
Mm-hmm.
above all. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
has to make sense to
Yeah.
me. And one of the teachers that I actually had for the longest was one of my really good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like studying Islam, like
Mm-hmm.
full on at Harvard. And
Yeah.
he, like, one thing he told me, he was like, Islam is very simple. It's
Yeah.
very easy to understand.
It
It's
is.
not this complicated thing that everybody
It
makes it out
is.
to be.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, as long as it makes sense to you, that's really all that
Mm-hmm.
matters. And like it's like you said, like, Islam is in accepting religion. And I think for the longest, I always, like, I remember I looked at a lot of my queer Muslim friends and was like, how can you be both? Like, how can it exist? And
but it's also like that conversation is always so interesting to me, because I know people who are on their queer Muslims who are on their deen and who are more devout followers of our religion than people who, you know, say, oh, I'm Muslim, you know?
Yeah.
And I also think this idea too is like, people love to omit certain parts when it becomes like beneficial. We're supposed to judge. That literally is a part of how we engage and how we consider ourselves to be Muslims. We don't judge. We trust that the relationship between Allah and someone, or what Allah sees and wills for someone, is for Allah and them to understand, and not for us to understand. It's not like, you know, and I don't want to call us like simple folk, but like, our God, you know, is a like literally an all-powerful, all-knowing God. How can I sit here and tell somebody else what Allah wants for them or doesn't want for? That's like a crazy ass assumption to make, right? Like, you know. And so I think it frustrates me, because you see people like having so much like judgment or making so many comments, and I'm just like, but you, like, who are you? Like, literally, who are you to like be telling somebody anything?
That's always what gets me, I think, at the end of the day. And the homophobia aspect ties into the misogyny aspect, and like just how they feel that they can just kind of like impose a lot of their ideals, just what fits their lives, what works for them.
Yeah.
And I think for me, once I really started to take matters into my own hands, no, seriously, take matters into my own hands, get my own teachers, and pursue religion how I deemed okay, and like also realizing, you know, I'm not gonna wake up one day and pray all 5 prayers. Going back to the whole imperfect thing. Yeah. Like, I'm gonna miss prayer, and it's okay, because I remember one time I was like, I'm gonna pray. Like, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and I'm gonna pray. I think I missed like the second prayer, and then I was like, I'm done. Like, I can't pray anymore.
But
like,
it's not that, and that's crazy, because it's not that. And I think like that again is I think a symptom of like the cultural component of it, because it's like, okay, like, Allah, He wants you to try. If we make trying not to be good enough, then no one's ever gonna try.
Yeah.
You can miss Fajr, right? And then be like, okay, let me make it up before I have to pray Duhr, right?
Yeah.
Or let me make up both of these prayers before. Like, that is it's okay, and you can get on that prayer mat and you can ask God for forgiveness, and you can be like, I'm so sorry that I missed this, right? And also, there's this phrase in Islam, and which I'm sure you've heard of, is like, if you take a step towards Allah, He will like run to you. And I think when we teach people absolutes, like it's all or nothing, we completely eliminate that like, that if you just take one step and if you just try to do one thing, you know, what you can do, God is gonna make it easier for you to do other things. There was a point in my life where I didn't, like I said, I didn't think that I would be in this religion, right? So like, even for me to be sitting here, to be in a conversation talking about Islam,
this is so insane. If you told 16, 17-year-old me, because I literally full on used to call myself an atheist. Like, there wasn't, you know how, you know, I'm so serious, like,
I ain't go that far.
I didn't go, but I went that far. I used to be like, people used to be like, but also I was dating a guy who didn't have any, he was an atheist. I remember he was just like, I just don't think there's anything up there, and I just think we're just vibing. And I was like,
and you were like, I guess we're just
I was like, I think we are too. Like, period. Like, that, I think, kept me from having to deal with everything about Islam that made me uncomfortable. When I was in college, like, I was doing every sin under the sun.
I'm screaming.
Except except what I was doing. Like, except what I was supposed to be doing. The only thing I didn't do, which I'm really proud about, is that I didn't eat pork.
Period. But assalamu alaikum, no thing for me. And I never let a D boy for me.
Exactly. That was the one thing I didn't do, and period, I'm proud of it. But I am proud of it. I am proud of it. I've never eaten pork.
As you should be. As you should be.
I've never eaten pork.
As you should be. But look confident when you say it, girl.
I've never eaten pork. And so that is something I can definitely stand on. Yeah. But for me, I think once I started, like, I think it was 2020, mid-pandemic. Yeah. I really needed some belief system. I had just moved back home. Yeah. And I moved back home after 8 years of living outside of my home. So that was like a huge shock for me. And I was like, this is not okay. What's happening? I was like super depressed. And I was like, I need something to like get me out of this.
Yeah.
And the world was just going to shit around me.
Obviously.
And I was like, no, I can't raw dog life like this. Like I
No,
need I need to turn to something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like I'm gonna lose my life.
Yeah.
And then that's when I really started. I actually by myself picked up a Quran and like started like looking at the transliteration and like understanding it for myself. And and that was the first Ramadan I also took seriously, because before I didn't take Ramadan seriously at all. Like I would fake do it in college, but also like my parents would give me a pass. They'd be like, "You're studying, like don't fast." And like so I was like, okay, like I don't need to fast. I'm studying.
She's like, I'm studying. I'm
But I took it serious, and I remember I was praying. I went and bought a prayer mat. I bought like all the cute new.
The jilbab,
I was like, I got all the colors.
I love it.
And those are all superficial things.
Yes, but still I love it.
It made me like, that was like the first Ramadan that I locked in.
Yeah.
And I just started learning from teachers that actually resonated with me, reading books that actually resonated with me. And like I think you mentioned earlier, the womanhood is held to such a high regard. Like mothers are held to such a high regard in Islam.
Yep.
That was just not, there were so many things that I was so sad that at the age of like 22, 23 that I was realizing
for the first time.
Yeah, and it broke down, I think, for me, a lot of the anger that I had towards the religion. But then it started this process of like grieving, which I was speaking to you earlier about. It's like, oh wow, like everything that I've been told was wrong. Like it wasn't true, like at all. Like this religion is actually so beautiful and so peaceful and so kind and so accepting and makes so much sense, and it's so logical. The Quran, I think, is one of the most logical texts. Like
it is. It literally explains the world that we live in, things that scientists didn't even have explanations for. The Quran has logical explanations, and it's things that have come to happen, you know?
Yeah. Even like the stories of Muhammad's wives, I thought were so like Khadijatu, Fatima, like it was like
Aisha,
it was like giving pussy power. Like
it really was.
It was giving pussy
really
power.
It was though. But I think that's the thing too. You hear about like, I didn't hear those stories growing up, and it's like, damn, like these were badass women. They were warriors. They were CEOs. They were entrepreneurs. Like they were about their business. And also, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, respected them, like confided in them, consulted them. And it's like when you see that, when you read that, and you start to realize like how integral women were to the development of Islam too, and the spread of Islam, and then you see how certain like people treat women, right, or believe you should treat women in Islam. It's like, nah, the math is not mathing. I think, like, how can you not like be inspired by those women? How can you not like want to like live a life and do things on no pun intended on your own terms? When you hear the stories of these women, right, or even like that, like he married, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, married a woman that was older than him, that taught him things that, like, you know, he worked for her.
Yeah. And those are all the stories that I started reading and learning about. And it really built so much. Like I had so much love for Islam, especially during that time, especially when I was going through such a hard time. It was kind of like a light for me, and like learning all of these stories. And I was literally just watching YouTube videos, which is crazy.
But that's how people are learning, and it's
yeah,
that's the whole point of YouTube. It's like this. I guess the internet in general. You have all this information that is like democratized now, and we have easy access to it.
I want to kind of go back to when we were speaking about Islam being in practice versus theory, and I guess to you, like, what does it mean to have like a strong deen?
Yeah, I think it's a strong connection to Allah. It's a strong connection to spirit, right? And I think that looks different for. It looks different for different people depending on where they're at, you know, in their life. I think somebody who has always maybe like, for example, if you've always from the time you were born, like never missed Ramadan and never like always do your salah, right? Deen looks a little bit different to you maybe because maybe it's like, it's not the acts, right? It's not the things that we're supposed to do, but it is the understanding, right? Whereas maybe for someone like, you know, where even I was prior, where I felt so far removed from it, where salah, like consistent salah was an issue for me. Picking up a Quran to read was an issue for me. Like for me, being on my deen, meant like doing those things and committing to those things, but really I think it is about like being intentional about your connection to Allah, and being intentional about like, I think what you're doing for life, like after this life, because as we know, this dunya is temporary. Like we don't live, and that's why I love when they say like you really got to be careful with Muslims, because we're not living for this lifetime. Like we don't care what you do in this lifetime, because what we're worried about is what happens after. You know, we're worried about Jannah. We're worried about that. Like this is temporary.
This is cute.
This is cute. Like this is a cute little kiki. Like, you know, we have some cute little moments here. But this is not, baby.
Yeah.
Like
the realty is
okay.
after.
The realty is after. And so I think like being intentional, like in the pursuit of that, for me, that's what it means to be on your deen. And just being more mindful. I'll say like in the last few years, as I've really taken my identity in Islam more like seriously, how I live my life has also changed. There are things that I used to do.
How so?
Like there are things that I used to do. Like, I mean, you know, we you know, this idea of not exposing sins, but like there's a time in my life where I used to be in these streets, like outside.
Yeah.
And like that's just not me anymore, and I'm grateful for that. But it's like that was a moment in a period of my life, but like getting closer to Islam, really being intentional, like it affects the decisions you make, you know. When you have that, I think that consciousness of like, no, like what I'm doing isn't really aligned with where I'm trying to go. You start to move differently. Even things like, I grew up in a household, like I said, that like gossiping, backbiting, like all that stuff, talking about other people, like I witnessed those things. And so I think like even for a long part of my life, that felt like normal, like hearing other people talk about other people, hearing people, like that was just normal because it's what I was raised in. I don't do that anymore. Like I don't even like to be in a room where people are like really talking about people, you know. I'll like tune it out. But things like that are also rooted in the fact that like I can now recognize that it's a sin. It's considered a sin, and it's something that I don't want to engage in, because that's the part they don't really talk about, is that like there are many sins you can commit, but it's still a sin. So I know I see people like judge people for doing something, or maybe not wearing hijab, or maybe doing something that's considered haram, and they're the same people that will sit there and curse somebody's mama like to the moon and back. And I'm like, girl, on Judgment Day, you're gonna have to answer for that. You know? And so I think, it just changes how you live your life. I think being on your deen is also like being conscious of that.
Yeah. And then another part I think about the deen too is like it's super personal.
Yes.
And like I think you mentioned earlier the hijab. And I think you said your sister's a hijabi.
Yeah, my sister's a hijabi, and like and she wasn't always a hijabi, and so seeing that progression has been really just really beautiful.
Do you think you will consider it one day?
I will. My thing with hijab is that I would not put hijab on until I'm very like just like I don't want to put hijab on and still do things or feel like my like spirituality isn't where it needs to be. Because I think in many ways when we push people, we tell women wear hijab, like hijab is not just a physical thing. Hijab is like a spiritual thing. And I've seen it even in my sister, like who she was. And, you know, she's always been, like, the light of my life. And, like, I think the sun shines at her ash. But she's just, like, a different version of herself. And it's, like, she is someone that, like, can, like, understands that it's not just about putting this thing. Like, her lifestyle changes. Like, my sister doesn't listen to music anymore. And, like, you know, it's like me, like, I'm that child that's still, you know, God is still working on me. There's still some things. And so I just don't feel like I would put it on before I'm completely there. But it is something that I hope to, you know, to do. And I hope that God, you know, Allah makes it easier for me as the years go on. Because I do think there is so much beauty in, like, this idea of, like, modesty, you know? And what hijab symbolizes for us.
I actually don't know if you got a chance to watch the video.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Basically, it was this video by this professor, or basically, she's an Islamic scholar, and she was essentially talking about how the term hijab is not in the Quran. It's not, you know, it was during Muhammad's time, where women were being raped. And essentially they created a garment that would just kind of standardize across like just so women couldn't be identified because wealthier women weren't getting raped because men could identify that they belonged to a
Yeah,
tribe,
yeah.
and so they wouldn't be attacked. Whereas like women of lower
Yeah.
class, they could identify, seek them out
Yeah.
immediately, and they would attack them. And so in order to kind of change this, and
Yeah.
so men wouldn't be able to suss out who is who,
Yeah.
they kind of standardize how women dress,
Yeah.
across, and then that's how the hijab came to
Yeah, I
be.
think they call it like a kimad, or there's a word for it that we
Yes.
still use it.
And in the Quran, hijab is only a term that comes up in regards to, I think, like veiling something.
Yeah, which is so interesting because I don't know if you've noticed, like, we're not the only religion that like engages in veiling, but for some reason it's so weaponized in our religion.
Demonized, yeah.
Yeah, it's demonized. Christian women veil, but nobody is telling a Christian woman that she's oppressed. That like no one's saying that. Like, oh, look at this beautiful display of modesty. And so I think like and I know this is a little bit off topic, but I think it just goes to the fact that like how Islamophobia also like changes people's perception of like things that are unilateral across many different religions.
Yeah, and for me at least, it like kind of debunked, because like for the longest my family has a huge issue with the fact that I have my hair out and I wear extensions and all these things. And I would always tell them, like, Muhammad didn't know nothing about acrylic nails.
I'm screaming,
and
listen.
extensions, because it just didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it didn't exist.
It
There wasn't even a thought. Yeah.
And the thing is, like, obviously there's still women that want to be modest and want to veil, and I totally respect that. But for me, I think it really informed the idea that, like, I don't know if I will ever be a hijabi.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
And I think that's okay.
And I don't think I think for a lot of people, when they say they're getting closer to their deen, they're like, I'm gonna stop listening. Like your sister made a decision to not listen to music. Like, I don't think that's ever gonna happen for me. Like, I think for me, when it comes to my Islam and my religion, it will always be kind of an internal connection and a way of life for me, in terms of, making, not backbiting, not gossiping, how I treat people, how I show up, how I am as a daughter, how I am as a sister, the way I treat my friends, the way I am a mother to my kids. I will always, I think, associate Islam with the way that I treat and make people feel instead of like how I physically show up in places. And I find that for a lot of Muslims, that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, that's not you're not Muslim enough.
I could absolutely, and it's so funny because it's like, even with women in my life, like, my cousin, I think, one of my cousins is one of the most, like, pious, most, like, honestly, like, religious and spiritual women I know, like, never misses a prayer. Like, it's really, when I think about, like, a good role model of, like, what a Muslim woman is, it's her. She doesn't wear hijab. And I don't think the fact that she doesn't wear hijab should discredit how whole in the religion she is,
Yeah.
And I think we have that really terrible, like, we have culturally, like, we have that terrible habit of, like, discrediting all of the things that a person does that, does, indicate that they're on their deen, because they're not doing it the way that we want them to do. And I think that goes back to the larger conversation we're having here about, like, is it Islam or is it culture? You know?
Having to work and function in this society, like corporate, like,
oh yeah, God.
I'm like, the idea of me being a hijabi in corporate America is like frightening. Like, it's like a jump scare. Like, me, I don't drink, and me not drinking at work events with clients, it's like such a whoa.
Yeah, and I
can't even connect with you like
God
that.
God bless the non-alcoholic movement and the mocktail movement, because I don't think, like, people like outside maybe who might not practice Islam or might not drink, like, don't, like, realize how isolating it can be to be, like, exist in a space where everyone is engaging in this thing that you don't engage in, and it, like, literally shifting the entire mood of how you can exist, of, like, okay, like, I feel really uncomfortable, or people don't feel like they can, like, associate or engage with me. And so I think, like, I will say, with the hijab and corporate culture thing, like, I used to feel like that as well. Like, I couldn't, like, I could have never imagined myself being hijabi and, like, being in a professional space. And it's like, now, like, when it's Ramadan or Juma, like, I sometimes have to, like, take,
Cool.
take calls or even like show up like on a panel or something like that. And I'm in like hijab, and it's like so funny because it's like there was a time where I was like, this would
Never
never be
happened.
me.
Yeah, no. I literally, I was like, I remember telling my mom, I will never do it. Like, I will never wear the hijab. And she was like, okay. She was like,
And
okay.
you know what? You might feel differently about it too,
Yeah.
because if you had asked me, what is it, like 4 years ago, I probably would have still said the same thing. And now, look, 4 years, I'm like, oh, like, yeah, I could see it. Like,
Yeah, no, I feel you.
or I want to. Like, so things also change, I think. Yeah.
I always struggle with, because like people say the craziest things to me when I tell them I'm Muslim.
Yeah.
Like even recently, like especially there's a lot going on around being Muslim right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That's
There
all I'm
is.
gonna say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I have really struggled
Mm-hmm.
to. I think at the beginning of my freshman career, I struggled with it.
Yeah.
And now I'm more so just like owning it straight up, like yeah, I'm Muslim, and
Yeah.
like
And what
moving it
about
like
it?
yeah, and just moving
Mm-hmm.
along. But I think I had been so I didn't realize like how what's the word like shaken up I am or
Mm-hmm.
how much Islamophobia got me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Until I was in corporate America and I was like hesitant to mention
That
that
you
I
were.
was Muslim.
Yeah.
And I was also hesitant to also say that, oh, I am not drinking because I'm Muslim. I
Yeah.
would always say I'm just not drinking right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm just,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes I even fake. And
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh yeah, it's a cocktail. It's a
Yeah.
margarita.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, it's like
It's
a
sounds.
mocktail.
It's
Like
like
I would
right.
go behind the like when I'm at client meetings, I'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, can you like not put
Yeah.
alcohol in
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And it makes me look shady. But like I just
No.
really don't. But it's like all of those dynamics I think in corporate America, a lot of people don't realize. But me even having to do that, I think has informed the way that I am about my religious identity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think it's important. I think that I can literally, and I can understand that because I think I used to be the same way. I used to be really hesitant to be like, oh, I'm Muslim, and I think it's because I again grew
Also,
up.
white people cannot deal with Islam. Like I just like the way that they respond to it is so weird.
I'm gonna say there's a certain demographic because also like there is a reason why Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and like I think we're seeing a lot more people that don't look like us like convert or revert, and but what I think it is that like is Islamophobia. There are many things in American society that only function, to be honest, because Islamophobia exists. These things that Islamophobia teaches you, these, America, white America, most of white America functions because they need these things to be true. Like to meet a peaceful, non oppressed, understanding, educated, like black Muslim woman. Because that's another thing too. I think that we don't talk about enough here is that like when you're a black Muslim, what people are up against is like, are you Nation of Islam Muslim? Are you like, and I
Yeah,
think a
we haven't even
lot
touched
of
on
people, like a lot of black, we were born into the religion, but a lot of like black Muslims have to deal with that as well. Or people ask like, oh, did you revert? And these are people that are just black American or maybe of the diaspora Caribbean who are in these things. And it's because the assumption that like black people can't possibly be like Muslim, and I'm gonna say that with quotation marks. And so I think like when we talk about like how white America struggles with that, it's because they need certain things about Islam to be true for other things to function. And when they're met with somebody that doesn't like fulfill those I think assumptions, it's a little bit jarring for them. But I will say that I lead with the fact that I'm Muslim now. I let people know, like, yeah, I'm a West African, black Muslim immigrant woman. That is my identity. It affects how I see and I do things because also, like, when we're not open about those things, I'm starting to realize that it also means that we are stifling parts of our identity. And how can we ever fully show up in places and be ourselves if there's this part of ourselves that we feel like we have to, like, be quiet about, Like, we should be able to be loud about all the parts of who we are.
And like you work in comms, like
Yeah.
PR and comms. So like how does that show up in your work?
Yeah, I think I'm hypersensitive to messaging. I'm hypersensitive to all of that stuff because of this lived experience, right? I don't think I see a lot of black Muslim women in comms, and that's another thing that has kind of like influenced me to be more vocal about it is because I'm not to say that they don't exist, but I don't think we're all being vocal about it. And so I think there's a bit of a responsibility now on me as somebody who is visible in this space to be like, yes, I'm Muslim. Like, these are the things that I believe. Also, because I feel like when you're not visibly Muslim, the things that people will say to you thinking that you are not Muslim, the beliefs that they will let out, like with the assumption that you are like another religion, is crazy. And you're like, yo, like, this is really how people perceive Muslims.
Yeah, and the thing is, I always get caught in those situations, and I always am like going back and forth, like, do I really want to be an educator right now, or do I just want
because
to
it's
like,
like the burden is like, but
yeah, but then it's like, actually, should I just let you go, just run out wild into the world, just continue with this feeling? Because it's like, I also just don't feel like I want to get into this with you.
And you are hot. I think anybody that knows you knows that you don't back on. You are on fire. Like,
And like, I know how I get, and so I'm like, no,
but also sometimes
like, I can't lose my job because
I
the
know.
way because the religion thing, you know how white America, they can't. It's a step too much for them.
I know.
Like, you know, black and white, like, we can talk about it.
But I think
like, when you take it
sometimes
to religion, it's like.
But I think sometimes you gotta knuck if you buck with people, because like, no, literally, because it's like, if we don't, then we let people continue to like just spew like things that are just not even rooted in facts, right? It's like they like to spew make believe about who we are and like what we stand for. And so sometimes I think that, like, most times I think, like, especially now in like 2024 is crazy. Like, we are like simultaneously moving forward and going back to the dark ages at the same time. And so I think like it requires all of us to be a little bit more vocal, especially in spaces that I think that you and I both occupy, where like we know we've traditionally known how to toe the line, right? Into like, we know how to switch, we know how to code switch, we know what to say, how to, but like, I think now like the universe is asking us to just be a little bit more like, nah, like, this is what it is, this is what it isn't. Like, I'm Muslim. Like, some shit is just not gonna fly anymore.
Yeah, no. It's something I think I'm still grappling with and trying to come into more, because my Muslim identity is becoming more a part of who I am. And like I said, it's something that I consider a way of life for me, and I want to be a way of life for me. How I approach relationships, everything, and so. It's something, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, yeah, I'm, this is something top of mind all the time. And sometimes I sit in the back room and I just, I'm pussy. Like, I'm just, cause like, I'm pussy because I'm pussy, not because I'm actually pussy, I'm not pussy. But like,
she said, play with your mother, not me.
Yeah. It's because I know if I actually open my mouth, it just won't be good. What advice would you give your younger self?
Ooh, girl.
As, now that you are here, you're with Islam. You're with Islam. You're locked in with her.
Yes.
Her
and I go together real bad.
What is something you wish someone told you when you were 16? Or do you wish that you got to this point earlier, or you were like, actually, no, it's fine. I'm glad that I got to it now, and it's okay. Like, I don't wish I changed anything about my journey.
I will say this. So, what's the word for it? With the understanding, again, that our religion gives us that everything happens by the will of Allah and everything happens as it's meant to be. With that understanding, I think everything that needed to happen. But do I wish that, like, I had, had the tools to rediscover Islam for myself a little earlier? Absolutely, because I think there's many things that it could have saved me from. I think there are a lot of, like, life lessons and just ways of being and doing that, I could have just avoided. And I think anybody who would want everybody would want an easier path. We all want ease, right? We don't necessarily want like
struggle,
but what is one of the pillars of the phrases of our religion? Verily with hardship comes ease. Like, and I'm understanding very much now that is, like, these lessons are meant for us to learn. So I needed to go through feeling disconnected, I think, from the religion to really appreciate where I am now, in that, like, this is a core part of my identity and it is something that I want to continue to, like, grow deeper faith in. But I wouldn't be able to do that had I not had a moment of, like, I think isolation, because literally I had to come back and seek God, and not, I don't want to get preachy, but like, I literally had to be like, God, I need you. Allah, I need you. Had I not gone through all the mess and, like, I had to be in the trenches in the ghetto for a little bit, because now I can recognize the come up. I can recognize the golden ticket that is Islam. But I don't think I would have been able to had it, like, I just continued to just exist, right, in Islam and be like, okay, well, I know what I'm supposed to know. I know my hadiths. I know like how to read Quran, but like I
Yeah.
have a deep appreciation for like what God has brought me through and to.
Yeah, and I think for me also, it's also influenced the type of people that I bring around me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like as I mentioned a
Yes.
little bit earlier, like I was dating an atheist.
Yes. He was
And
brave.
not because he was an atheist, he was a bad person. He was just a bad person in general.
She said,
But
it wasn't the non-believing.
it wasn't the non-belief
Let's make it
system.
clear, it wasn't the non-believing. He was
But
just a piece of
yeah, he was just a piece of shit. But I think for me, it's definitely changed. Like even who I want to marry in the future.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
before I would never have thought like, oh, I want to marry a Muslim because I want to raise my kids in Islam, and realizing the beauty of Islam,
Yeah.
and like you said, like the golden ticklet that is
It's
Islam.
listen, first of all, I want to be very clear. Women who follow Islam, like, come on, like, there ain't no 50-50. Your money is your money. His money is your money. I think there's a level of respect. Like, there's a lot, and to that, yeah, it's a golden ticket. And I think for so long I didn't realize like what it meant to have like a husband. Because like you, I was like, oh yeah, they're never gonna catch me marrying a man that's Muslim. I'm like, it's absolutely not for me. Now I'm like, why would I marry? You know, not to say the other men are not great.
Yeah.
The non-Muslim men are also, y'all are kings. But it's like they're just little things, right? That like now are important to me, right? So one thing
Yeah.
I didn't even think about was like, yo, when I have a family, like when my children are born, like who's gonna call the adhan in my baby's ear? So like, you know, it's little
Yeah.
things like that, so that my baby knows, like understands and recognizes that. Like when I pray, am I gonna pray all by myself? Like you like. Now it's like a thing. Like I can't wait till the day where like, you know, my man is leading us in prayer, right?
Yeah.
And these are all things that I think I never really even thought about, where I was just like, no, I don't want those things. But be knowing my religion more now, I'm like, these
Yeah.
are all the things that I want. Like these are like pillars of like identity that I want,
Yeah.
you know, me and my family to
Yeah, and when I
experience.
think about like a healthy, loving family, I want that for my family.
Yes.
And that's what Islam has shown me.
Yeah.
And I think about what I want to the type of values that I want in my family, the type of family that I want me and my husband to kind of build.
Yeah.
The love that we share in between, you know, the love that we'll model between us for our kids, like that is so rooted in our like connection to Islam.
Yes.
And so those are all things as I've, you know, as my brain has grown, because
you what is it? Your frontal lobe isn't fully developed.
Yeah, but mine's locked in last year.
Locked in. Did you experience your Saturn return yet?
What the hell is that?
You don't know what your Saturn return is?
No.
Oh, girl, thoughts and prayers.
Oh my God, is that like after?
It's coming. We'll talk offline. It's coming.
So once that happens as well for me,
yeah,
then we're all really locked in.
It honestly might bring you closer, because
period.
The years that I experienced my Saturn return were the years where I got like, that's when I really got locked in.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I think I'm still waiting on her, because I haven't really locked in like that.
No, she's a little quick. She likes to tussle. So.
But once my brain fully grew and was like there, I was like, this is something I definitely want in my future for my family. When I think about what Islam is and what my family, what I want, the values that I want my family to have, and I think it really influenced how I date, influenced the type of friends that I choose to bring around me, the friendships that I hold close to me, and the friendships that I don't.
Yeah.
As well as the work opportunity, like just like how I move through work, my passions, everything. Like last year was a huge reset year for me. Yeah. And I think Islam was a huge part of that for me, and in terms of guiding me in my process and my journey. Ramadan last year was like really rough in terms of like just like where I was in my life. Yeah. Like when I look back at last year, I think it encapsulates like everything that Islam means to me, and like how much I have grown in the faith. And within that message, I'm still imperfect through it all.
And it's okay.
And it's fine.
And it's okay.
And I will live. And like, even if I do miss prayer, like I can try again tomorrow. Yes. And it's about the process, and it's about constantly having that intent to go back. Yes. And I don't think that clicked once until my brain clicked for me. This was such a great conversation, I think.
Yeah, no, I really love this. Yeah.
About the journey in Islam. And in terms of just, I think we have such different journeys in how we've come into the religion. Yeah. And I think also being in a space where we're holding, I don't know, just holding space for our imperfections. Yes. And our journey. I don't think we see that a lot, especially with just like the Islam community online, I feel like there is a
girl.
huge pressure to constantly look a certain way, perform a certain way, and do the religion a
And I'm
certain
gonna
way.
let y'all know, you can do a close up in this. I don't play with the haram police. So if you come up on any of these podcast episodes, we will fight.
We will.
God is still working on me. We will fight.
No, for real.
No, but I agree. We don't have many places where we can speak about these things openly without fear of judgment, without fear of like somebody like, you know, basically like trying to put you in your place.
Or like teach you. And like I already know there's gonna be a brother that comes up in the comments and goes, sister, you should cover. And I'm literally gonna be like, fuck you, respectfully, like, fuck you. No, seriously, like, fuck you, like, whoever you are, like, because I know someone's gonna come and do it.
I told y'all she was hot.
Yeah, no, I know someone's gonna do it, and so, and it also defeats the whole ethos of this whole podcast, which is your Islam is truly for yourself.
Yeah. And you deserve to understand your religion on your terms, not the terms.
On your terms.
I love this name because it fits everywhere.
It fits everything. And that's the whole point. We are talking about religion on our terms. Yeah. We're doing it on our terms for ourselves. It's not
in a brave space, not a safe space.
Period.
Rather safe for us, not for you. Thank you for inviting me on. Thank you for creating a space to have this conversation because I think so many of us want to have it, but don't have the space to have it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really like amazing what you're doing because you get to show people conversations, especially I think like Guinean and like people of the diaspora. You can have these conversations. They can be productive. They can be like insightful and in places that are safe for you to have them.
For sure. And I'm just so glad I was able to get you in to honor me with your presence, honestly. I'm honestly so humble before you.
Oh, please, girl.
No, seriously. She's really that girl. We didn't talk a lot about your career today, but
I'm screaming.
Fatou is that girl. If you enjoy this episode, please be sure to follow us at On Our Terms Pod and your host, you Tomsy. Yes, that is my name backwards. And it's Fatou B. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.